Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about. Except for this first one, because I'm actually playing a little bit of catch up here because I ended up missing this game last week and I did want to let you know about it, and that's that there's a new expansion for the game Oath. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a asymmetric game that has legacy-esque elements, because as players are playing the game, they're going to be making changes to the rules and some of the laws that get passed. And these changes are semi-permanent because when you finish up the game and then put it away, some of those decisions will carry forward into the next game when you go and take that game back off of your shelf. This new expansion is going to be offering more ways that players can manipulate the game, and it's also going to be offering a solo mode as well, so if you are interested in checking this one out, you can find it on Kickstarter now. I also want to make a quick mention to a game that will be coming to crowdfunding at some point in the future, although I don't have a launch date for this one just yet. But this one is called Knitting Circle, and the reason that I want to mention this one is because it is a Calico game, as you might have already been able to tell by the cover art here, but this is a standalone follow-up to the game Calico. I don't think this is going to be an expansion anyway. I think these games are two very independent games, but I'm sure there will be either some crossover in the way that they feel or even in some of the mechanisms. But I know Calico was a huge hit, so if you were a fan of that game, you'll definitely want to check out this one. And of course, if you want to hear more about this one as the details come out, you can subscribe down below because I will cover this one in a lot more detail during the week of its launch. I always want to give a quick mention to Alex over at Boardgame Co, and it's good timing here because he just uploaded his upcoming campaigns video today, that if you like these videos, you'll definitely want to check out that one as well, because I go through the games each and every week, but Alex looks a little bit further ahead at the start of the month and gives you a good idea of the heavy hitters that are going to be launching for that month. Of course, he's also got a ton of other great content as well that you'll definitely want to check out, especially if you are interested in crowdfunding games. And you can find all sorts of reviews and playthroughs and general commentary on the hobby, and he always does a fantastic job. But if you are looking for even more games, you'll definitely want to check out Zilla Blitz, especially if you are interested in the historical war games, because this is an area that I don't get into quite as deeply, and that is his sole focus on his channel. So if you want to learn more about those games, there's other crowdfunding platforms and other outlets that I don't look as much into, but he will have you covered, and he also puts up a video each month letting you know of the games that he knows about so far, but he'll also keep you updated throughout the month as well. And that's it for an intro, but we do got quite a few games launching this week, so let's check them out. And we're starting off with a banger here because the first one we have is called Ada's Dream, and this one is my own personal pick of the week. And this is interesting because I wasn't super interested in this one just based on my initial impression of the theme, which is that you're helping Ada Lovelace build the first computer. But after looking into this one some more, I'm really interested in the gameplay on this one, and I think the theme actually props up that gameplay quite well, and I think it blends in really, really nicely, and it actually gets me pretty excited about the theme. And one big part of that is that the way that you actually score points in this game is very mathematical, and this board here represents the computer that you're going to be building up throughout the game. And you're going to be adding different colored dice to it, but you're also going to be adding different cogs. Each of these cogs are going to have different mathematical symbols on them in order to add or multiply or subtract the values of your various dice, and this is essentially how you score points in the game. And you might be wondering, why would you ever want a cog with a minus symbol on it if the result of these formulas you're creating end up being your victory points? And the answer to that is that you mostly don't, although each player will be starting with 2 of these minus cogs at the beginning of the game, and you might just want to get them out on your board for other victory point conditions that you may acquire throughout the game, because players can actually get these little punch cards that slot into each of the columns and rows of your board, and these create different objectives that players are trying to achieve, and maybe the die or cog that you're putting there is helping to achieve that objective. And also, if we just disregard those punch cards for a second, each of the columns that you create in this game do have a maximum scoring amount. This is a value that you can increase throughout the game, but if your formula is already way above that amount, putting a minus value there isn't going to do anything to affect your score, as long as you planned this out well enough, and this is where a lot of those fun decisions come into play here. Not to mention, those punch cards are a really cool thematic touch. This is a game where players are primarily taking their actions through a rondel system, but then you're going to be drafting a die as the outcome of this, and then on a future turn you can use that die to take a different action depending on the color of that die. This game does also use deck building, but that is primarily to augment your actions or allow you to take additional actions on your turn. And what's neat about the deck building in this game is that anytime that you gain a card, you're going to be discarding one of your other cards, so you never have to worry about trying to take actions in order to get cards out of your hand. This is a game that plays over a series of turns, and on a player's turn they can either take a workshop action or a dice action. Whenever you take a workshop action, you're going to be choosing a die out on the rondel board and then pushing it into the next location clockwise. Whenever you do this, you're going to be pushing a die out of that new location, and that's the die that you're going to be able to take into your possession. The only caveat here is that the die that you kick out has to be of a lower value than the die that you pushed into it. Each of these locations also have their own specific actions that you can take anytime that you kick a die out of them, and these can allow you to do things like gain cards of different types, gain additional resources of different types, or even move up various research tracks. You also gain an additional bonus if you're able to completely clear out one of these locations. So if I was to kick the 6 into the next location, that would clear out the location where the 6 was, and that would grant me a special bonus. But after you've resolved all of this, you'll also be able to optionally play a card from your hand for additional benefits. Then after you've done that, you might be able to move up various research tracks if you have certain cards that align with the colored die that you just drafted. You'll then be keeping that die until you're able to install it on your computer, and like I said, the value is what will be determining your victory points at the end of the game. So of course, having a higher valued die does give you more victory point potential, but that's not the only thing the value of the die is used for, because like I said, there are these various objectives here that might require dice of certain values. And I also mentioned that you get to play a card optionally whenever you do draft a die, and the cards do have requirements as to when they can be played depending on the value of the die that you drafted. But like I said, you can either take a workshop action or you can take a dice action, and once you actually have a dice in your possession, then you can spend it in order to take its action. And there's 4 different colored dice offered in this game, and there's 4 different locations out on the board corresponding to those colors. Playing an orange die allows you to draft new cards into your hand. Playing a yellow die is going to allow you to move up the travel board, which can grant you with different bonus actions and resources. Playing a green die is going to allow you to move up the institution track, which also gains you bonus actions and resources in a different way. And then finally, we have the purple die, which players will be able to use to gain those punch cards. What's interesting about all these 4 locations is that each of them also do have a small mini game and a decision you'll get to make when you go there, which can also gain you additional victory points at the end of the game. Once you've done all that, you'll then be able to place your die into one of the open locations on your computer board. But whether or not you take a workshop action or a dice action, you're always allowed to take one bonus action at the end of your turn, and you can do this to either spend resources to increase the max amount of points that you can get for one of your columns on the computer, or you can use this bonus action to install cogs at the various locations between the dice. In order to do this, you need to use actions previously in order to clear out those locations so that the cog can actually be installed. And of course, you do need to acquire those cogs, which you can do through the various actions offered in the game. The game continues like this, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. And I realized I didn't mention when the last game was launching, but that one's going to be on June 3rd. And also on June 3rd, we have Clash D-Day Special Edition. And this one is a head-to-head Axis versus Allies 2-player game. And each player is going to be trying to take control over the beach of Normandy, with one player starting at the shoreline and the other player starting at the ridge. Each player is going to have their own set of tiles that come in infantry, anti-tank, and then tank units, and they each have a rock, paper, scissors mechanism where one is stronger against another. Players are going to be taking turns spending up to 4 action points, with each of your actions costing a different amount of points. But essentially the different actions you can do is place a token out on your side of the board, either at the ridge or at the shoreline of the beach, or instead you can move a rear unit to the front of another unit. You can return a unit at the front of the line back to your supply, but of course, once players have put out enough tokens, eventually they're going to bump into each other, and this is what creates a clash. Whenever this happens and it's your turn, you can attack the clashing opponent unit, but only if your unit is the stronger one. If that's the case, then you automatically win. You're going to be sending your opponent's unit back to their supply. This is where the puzzle comes into play as you're trying to manipulate your units so that they end up clashing in a position where they are the stronger one. Each player does have their own unique win condition that they can try to fulfill in order to win the game, but as you're putting your units into the various columns, if you're able to eventually reach the other side of the board, taking control of that column all the way to your opponent's side, then that's going to be locking in that column and you're going to be scoring a point for that. And if you're able to do that 3 times, then that's another way that you can win the game. Not only that, but whenever you do this, you also get to gain a victory card, which gives you a special ability that you can use at any point in the future of the game. And the player that is able to either fulfill their win condition or complete 3 of those columns is the one that wins. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And also launching on the 3rd, we have a reprint and a bit of an expansion for the game Agemonia. And this is a game that I did think was launching last week, so I did already cover it, but I did get a little bit more information since then. And I mentioned that there's going to be 2 new heroes added to the game, and they're also going to be making some changes to the amount of time you have in a given scenario, allowing you to explore a little bit more. Of course, that does make the game a little bit easier, so they will be adding some more advanced elite enemies that you can add to those scenarios in order to bring the difficulty up again. But I just found out they're also going to be adding a bunch of new items and gear that you'll be able to mix into your game, and they'll also be including some card dividers that'll help you organize the game. And my favorite part of this is that they are going to be providing an errata sticker set in order for everyone to be able to update their rules without having to print off a whole new rulebook or purchase a new rulebook. I really like this approach because I think these new rules changes will make the game better, and I do want to apply them to my game, and this is just the most cost-effective way for everyone. Like I said, I did already cover this one, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And also I did cover the previous campaign previously in that previous footage, so it makes sense, I promise. And this is called the New Heroes expansion. So of course it is going to be adding a couple new heroes into the mix that you can choose to play with, which each operate a little bit differently than all the other heroes. And there is also going to be a new story that players can play through that is community driven, meaning that it is partially fan made, but the original creators do also have their hands on it, and they're massaging it to make sure that it works within the system and that it's being properly play tested and that everything is properly balanced with it, and that includes whatever components are required to play through that story. Another new change that's coming with this campaign is that they will be officially changing some of the timers for the scenario, which essentially means that players will have more time to explore each of those given scenarios. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't start my campaign yet because I just love exploring every single corner and detail in a game that I can. And this is the feedback that their team has been receiving, so they wanted to give more time for that exploration. But of course, having a longer timer could also make those scenarios a little bit easier to play. So they're also adding in an elite enemy deck that you can use to upgrade the challenge rating of any of these scenarios. If you don't want to wait till the campaign starts, they do have all these changes listed in their forums here, so you can just go ahead and apply those changes now to your current campaign. But I do like everything I've seen with this new reprint campaign, and I was anticipating this campaign coming very soon. I just didn't realize it was going to be this soon, and I was hoping to play my game before jumping in on this second campaign. And I guess I still will try to do that, but with the reception this game's been getting and from my initial impressions of it before, I have a lot of confidence in this one, and it is another campaign that I definitely recommend, so if you want to check it out, I will have it linked down below. And of course, you can click to get notified. And this one is our Discord pick of the week. And Agemonia is a cooperative story-driven RPG board game that takes place in a high fantasy world, and this world has a few problems. First of all, people are discovering some strange ancient devices that seem to be powering up for unknown reasons. And these wouldn't be such an issue except for they're causing earthquakes, tidal waves, electrical storms, and a whole bunch of other cataclysmic events. On top of this, different factions are competing to harness this power for their own benefits, which happens to be throwing the whole region into a civil war. This is a campaign game, and it offers over 30 unique scenarios with some interesting features like evolving maps, and it also gives the players a lot of freedom because it's really up to you and your party to decide if you want to save Agemonia from its destruction or if you want to be its destroyer yourselves. Of course, players will be encountering different locations, monsters, puzzles, and be engaging in combat. And there's also a really neat focus on timed events that will get triggered, and if you don't complete them within enough turns, then those opportunities are going to be lost. Players will be able to develop their own individual characters by making different moral choices, and players will also be able to select the different actions that their characters have, and you'll be able to change those and upgrade them throughout the game. The campaign offers branching storylines with different variant endings for each scenario, and a really neat aspect of this is that there's the whole concept of failing forward. So if you happen to fail a scenario, it doesn't actually end the game and you don't need to reset anything. It just actually ends up taking you down one of those variant paths where you didn't happen to succeed in that scenario, which affects all the scenarios moving forward. This creates a little bit of you win some, you lose some, rather than trying to always win some. And it's also going to create a ton of variability for players like me who just love to see every outcome for every scenario. Something that I think is a real highlight of this game is the way that the map works. It's going to be using a booklet so that you have the maps already set out for you, and you don't have to piece together different tiles in order to build up your map. Completing different scenarios will send you on a path to another page in the book that's going to present you with a new map. And something you might be noticing on this map is that there's a few different icons with numbers on them, and these are called story points. And story points are actually associated with a card that's going to unfold a little bit of the story and present you with some different opportunities, challenges, and choices to make that are going to affect the rest of the game. And these are going to activate when you get within a certain distance of them, and then you're going to draw the associated card, which is going to present you with your discovery. And depending on the outcome of that card, different things can happen, including changing the form of the map. Some of the cards actually have sections of the map, and depending on the outcome, you'll have to put that card down on the map, and it's actually going to change the way that the map looks, and it's going to present some new opportunities because of that. Players are going to be fighting and completing these different skill checks by using their three main skills of might, agility, or will, and then combining that with some dice rolling. In each round, players are each going to be able to take an action, which could be things like healing, attacking, focusing, which allows extra dice rolls, or even performing additional maneuvers, which I'll explain in a second. But the way that this works is that players are actually going to be pre-deciding the actions they're going to take, and then an initiative card gets drawn that's going to dictate the player's turn order depending on the types of actions that each player took. So the initiative card actually has a list of action types, and then they get resolved in that order. If there are enemies on the board, their actions will also get executed as part of this. And then I mentioned maneuvering, which players are always able to do at least once on their turn, but you can spend your action in order to perform an additional maneuver. And maneuvering just allows players to move or recover stamina or mana, but it can be played at any time on their turn, and you aren't locked into your decision like you are with actions. And stamina is a very important resource in the game because you're going to be using it to do all the sorts of things that you're going to do, but it also doubles as your health. And I feel like the Discord community and myself are getting a little too aligned lately because this one's also my pick of the week. And as usual, there's a few reasons why I'm picking this one, but a big one is that I just think there's a ton of really great design choices. First of all, I really love to see these map books. It's a great mix of functional design. It's got some really beautiful artwork as well, and I really like how everything's broken up. It's very clean and easy to see where the different spaces are and the different icons, but it also has that sort of chaotic and natural feel to it. Of course, those are a little bit more focused on the aesthetics, although those do help streamline a game. The book itself also helps streamline the game because you don't have to go setting up complex scenarios and looking for different components and tiles. And especially for an RPG style game, this is a really nice feature to have because it really eliminates some of those inhibitions that you might have when it comes to playing the game due to the length of the setup. I also really like the fail forward aspect of the game, and I think a lot of RPGs should take notes here because it has a lot of benefits when it comes to both immersion and streamlining the game. It really gives your game an extra layer of continuity rather than breaking players out of the game world anytime something goes wrong, and it makes the game a little bit more about having fun and dealing with your failures rather than trying to get everything right in the first go. It also reduces fiddliness and streamlines your entire experience since you won't have to be resetting components and players back to certain save points in the game, and there isn't that whole aspect of having to do a complete hard reset because you did something wrong. And I think most of us would agree that it's more fun to continue moving forward rather than to reset and then do everything over again. But the nice thing is that that is still always an option if you want to play it that way. I also like how players can upgrade their actions and specialize in certain areas and change what they're good at throughout the game. I think it's really cool how the pre-programmed actions work with the maneuvers that give you a little bit of flexibility, but then also some restrictions on every turn. And this one might be more specific to my taste when it comes to board games, but I really like how this campaign doesn't have a whole lot of flavor text. It does have quite a lot, but you're going to be reading it in bite-sized chunks. I think most of the story is actually uncovered through the story cards as you play the game, rather than reading pages and pages of story from a booklet. And this next one we have is going to be launching on the 4th, and this is a campaign that I did cover a couple times in the past, but I got pushed back until now, but I'll just quickly go over it again for you. And this one is for the Tiny Tables campaign. And what this is exactly like what it sounds. It's just really small tables that you're going to be using in order to organize your components and just have a little bit of a novelty item that's of great build quality because these are solid wood, and they're really neat because they do have the little leaves that come out. And then you can use the leaves in order to store your various components, and then of course the center to do the same or store your cards, depending on the size of the game. It looks like you could play some games in this table, but I probably wouldn't buy it for that purpose. But it's going to come in a bunch of different colors and types of wood. And of course, if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 4th, we have the 3rd entry in the Mythic Battles series. First, we had Mythic Battles Pantheon, which focused on Greek mythology. And then we had Ragnarok, which focused on Norse mythology. And now we have Isfet, which is going to be focused on Egyptian mythology. And in case you're wondering, you will also be able to get the previous content for Mythic Battles Ragnarok as part of this campaign, and there will be some new content for it as well. But if you're looking for Pantheon, I believe you can find it on the Monolith store, or at least it will be available there very soon. Don't quote me on that, but it's not going to be offered in this campaign. But if you're not familiar with these games, they are skirmish games that all play a little bit different from each other, but they all share the same core mechanisms. Each player is going to be playing as a different god and then drafting different units, with each of those units coming with a different card that you're going to be using to build up your deck. Each of the units play very different from each other, and the combination of your units along with your god is going to add a lot of variability from game to game. There's two ways you can win the game, either by defeating your opponent's god or by gathering up enough divine essence. What's neat about this game is that players can also play through a bunch of different scenarios as well, and these can be either one-time scenarios, or you can chain them together into a grander campaign that is all outlined in the rulebook. But this is a game that plays over a series of turns where players are going to be playing cards from their hand in order to activate their units. What's interesting about this game is that the cards don't actually say much on them at all. They just reference the unit. Whenever you play that card, you're going to be able to activate that unit, and then that unit's going to have its own player board that you're going to be using to track its health and its stats and its various special abilities. And playing that card just allows you to activate that unit and take advantage of the different options that it offers. There are some basic actions that players can use in order to move around and attack, and positioning is very important in this game because terrain is a big factor, and you're going to want to be taking advantage of that as much as possible and using it against your opponent. Another interesting fact in the way this game works is that once your unit dies, you don't actually remove that card from your deck, and if you draw it in a future turn and you don't have a unit alive to activate with it, you can actually use it to power up other abilities of the units you still have alive. The game does resolve combat by using dice, and it has a really unique mechanism with how this works because you're going to be rolling your dice, and then you'll be able to sacrifice any of your dice in order to modify the others. On top of that, if you ever have a combination of dice that add up to a value of 5, you can actually re-roll those dice and then add that value of 5 onto the new results of that roll. So this creates a situation where you can cascade your rolls in order to cause even more damage. But the game continues like this until you've wiped out your opponents or gathered up enough essence, and then you win the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also launched on the 4th, we have Pillars of Heracles, and this one is a competitive area control game where each player is going to be playing as a different region of Greece with their own asymmetric abilities, but essentially players are going to be trying to influence different areas of the board, take control of those different regions, and deploy their units, moving them around in different ways depending on the type of unit that they are. Players are going to be scoring points for controlling different areas, but also for building buildings, and of course completing various objectives. This is a turn-based game where at the start of your turn, you're going to be checking for control in any of the regions. What's interesting about the way that this whole checking for control system works is that you can actually challenge other players for control of their regions in one of your previous turns. And if they don't stop you before your next turn occurs, then that's going to be triggering you to take control of that region. This can also move you up various tracks and gain you all sorts of benefits, but after you've checked that, you're going to be doing your various actions, and in order to do your actions, you're actually using a rondel system in this game, and in order to move your pawn around that rondel, you're going to be playing a card from your hand. Each of these cards are going to have a different value associated with them, and then that's going to determine how many times you move around that rondel. But each of these cards will also have an ability associated with them as well, and whichever card you choose, you're going to be able to use that ability. And this is where some really interesting decisions come into play, because there might be a certain ability that you want to use, but then there might be a particular action on the rondel that you really want to use. And if those two align, then that's going to be really exciting and make your decision really easy. But if that's not the case, then that's up to you to decide which is more important. Most of the locations on the rondel do allow you to move a unit out on the board, but in addition to that, they can also do things like allow you to purchase more cards to add into your deck, pay to deploy more units, pay to deploy buildings in areas where you have units, which can do different things like grant you additional power, discounts in various ways, and also bonus actions or victory points at the end of the game. Not only that, but they can also move you up the various tracks, which will make your other actions more powerful as the game goes on. One thing to note about using the rondel is that you do need a card to play in order to take that action, and whenever you use a card, it does get discarded until you spend a turn replenishing those cards. So that is another option that you can do. Instead of using the rondel, you can instead take a replenish action. It's going to take all your used cards back into your hand, and it does also allow you to do a few other smaller things as well. But the game ends as soon as 5 cities are built, 2 tracks are completely advanced on, or 3 level 3 objective cards have been completed. But then at that point, the player with the most victory points from controlling the various areas, completing those objective cards, and building the various buildings is going to be the one to win the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 4th, we have Paw of Duty, which is a simple 2-player tactical card game where on a player's turn, you're going to be drawing 2 cards from the main deck and then choosing one to put into play. Players are going to be putting those cards into a grid system in the center of the table, and each of the cards actually come in 3 different types that have a rock, paper, scissors mechanism, where each of the types is going to be able to do double damage against a specific other type of card. Each of the cards will also have a value that represents both their strength and their health, but they'll also have a value that represents the amount of tactics cards you'll be able to play in addition to that card. These tactics cards will grant you with all sorts of special abilities that you'll be able to use to manipulate the board in your favor, or augment your various cards out in the battlefield. The game can end in one of 2 ways. Either you capture enough of your opponent's cats, or you're able to create a row of 3 cats in any direction and then hold that for an entire turn. The first player to do either of those things wins the game, and if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 4th, we have a campaign that's not for a board game, but for something to help you organize your games, and this one is called Gamelax because it allows you to organize your games in your Gamelax shelf. This campaign is going to be for a bunch of STL files that you'll be able to print off in order to create all sorts of shelves to store your games in the most elite way, horizontally. But there's also a bunch of other cool ideas here, like creating little drawers that you'll be able to put your smaller games or components into. And there'll also be shelves that allow you to prop your smaller games up in more of a display style. I'm sure there'll be some other cool ideas in the campaign as well, and if you do want to check it out, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 4th, we have Bunny Boom, and this one is a competitive game where the town is overrun with bunnies, and these bunnies are constantly multiplying. The goal of this game is to accumulate the least amount of bunnies than all the other players, and then that allows you to win the game. But the way this game plays is through tile placement, because players are going to be managing a hand of 3 tiles, and then there's also going to be a display. And anytime that you play a tile, you're going to be taking a new tile from the display. Players are going to be placing these tiles out on the board, but what's interesting about this is that you have very limited placement options, because the main board is just a cross of spaces, and players can only put tiles into those spaces. Players will also each have their own meeples, and these are going to be starting at the center of the board. But what's really neat about the tile placement in this game is that anytime that you place a tile, your meeple is going to be moving from its current position to the tile that you just placed, activating all the abilities of the tiles that it moves through. This is normally not a good thing because each of the tiles can actually have 2 different abilities. There's a placement ability, and then there's the ability that is activated when you move through it. The placement ability is normally a good thing for you that allows you to jump over tiles or force your opponents to move into tiles, whereas the ability that you activate for moving through it is normally a bad thing that's probably going to be gaining you bunnies into your supply, which, like I said, you want to have the least amount of at the end of the game. The game continues like this, with players continually adding tiles to an empty space out on the board, but once all the spaces are completely full, players can then start placing tiles on top of other tiles. and each of the tiles are going to have a suit associated with them. And if you place a tile on top of a tile with a matching suit, then you're going to be offsetting those tiles, indicating that that space can no longer have any more tiles placed on it, but then the new tile is also going to become the new ability of that location. If the suits of the tiles don't match, then it just gets stacked on top of the other tile, replacing that tile, and players can continue to place tiles on that location, but anyone that places a tile that doesn't have a matching suit is going to have to gain the amount of bunnies indicated on that tile. Of course, this means that that's something that you don't want to happen to you, but you want to force your opponents into that position as much as possible. The game ends once all the tiles run out, or if there's no valid placements left to place your tiles, then the player with the fewest bunnies wins the game, and there are a few additional expansions that players can mix into this game as well, adding in a more real-time element with a sand timer, and then also incorporating a fox token as well, which players can use to push other bunnies around or eliminate them from the board. If this one sounds interesting to you, definitely check it out, and I'll have it linked in the description down below. Also on June 4th, we're returning to 7th Citadel with a brand new expansion. I do want to say that this is a game that I do own, and this game is also a perfect 10 for me, and I don't hand those out very often. I think the amount that they've accomplished with this game is just incredible. This is a hugely ambitious game, and the actual gameplay involved in this is a lot of fun, but I will also say it's probably not for everyone. This is a cooperative game, and it's also heavily focused on exploration and adventure, so if you want a lot of action, this might not be a game for you. And of course, it is a campaign game, so it does take up a lot of time, but I will also say it's the best campaign game that I've ever played because it doesn't fall into a lot of those issues that I find with other campaign games where I'm presented with different decisions and there just isn't a lot of information or clues indicating to me which one's going to hurt me and which one's going to harm me. And I just find that in a lot of campaign games, a lot of my decisions just end up feeling very random, and although that still can happen on occasion in this game, it happens infrequently enough that it feels more just part of the world, and usually you do know the outcomes in advance, and it's up to you to push your luck to try and get the outcome, or if you're doing something a little bit more mysterious, it usually holds true that if you succeed in a check, it's going to be something good, whereas if you fail, it could be something negative or nothing at all. This is a game that does reward you for exploring, so you might find new information or new clues and items that might help you discover the appropriate choices to make in the future or to make those future challenges a little bit easier. But before I get into exactly how this game plays, I'll just let you know a little bit more about the new content that's going to be added, and it's going to be adding a brand new threat or scenario into the game called the First Garden. And it's going to be taking the players to the highest, snowiest peaks of the collapsing lands, and there's going to be a whole new mountain region to explore along with a brand new dialogue book. There's going to be a bunch of new content and expansions that you'll also be able to mix into the game that you can play with this new threat, as well as the ones offered in the core box. And if you did miss out on that first campaign, this is a great opportunity to get your hands on this game because this one will be offering the original content, and that original content is going to be delivering very soon here with this upcoming November, whereas the new content is going to be delivering in November of 2025. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a game that offers a bunch of different overarching campaigns that are all known as threats, and each of these are going to be broken into bite-sized chapters. These new scenarios are a lot more structured than the original threats that were offered in 7th Continent, if you are familiar with their first iteration on the system. And there are quite a lot of changes with this version of the game, with this one being more focused on exploration and failing forward. And they've done a lot of work to make this one a lot less punishing if you end up failing in one of the scenarios, whereas in the original 7th Continent, the rulebook instructed you to restart the whole threat, which most people, including myself, would just house rule that to something else, like just losing some of your items or resetting back to a earlier point, because you put a lot of time into this and you don't really want to start back to zero, especially once a lot of those surprises have already been discovered and are still fresh in your mind. This one also makes the game a lot less grindy, where players aren't constantly trying to hunt or fish in order to get more cards back into their deck. And this one does that by introducing a component that players are going to be using to track their health, and this normally does get reset every time you return back to your home camp in between each of the chapters. And players will end up in situations where they're going to be taking some damage and losing health, but players can also just choose to give up some of their health by pushing themselves a little bit further, which in turn gets them more cards back into their deck. What's really neat about this is that there might be other events that you'll run into throughout the game that have a different outcome because you are of low health, or you might have to turn down a really risky but rewarding option because you need to focus on surviving. So I really like that that punishment is still there, but it's done in a way that isn't completely aggravating. That being said, I really did love 7th Continent as well, but I will say that I cheated quite a bit because I was not a big fan of that whole reset mechanism. This will probably make a lot more sense if I actually explain the game, because this is a game where players are exploring a map that's going to be made up of a bunch of different cards. The cards are all going to be organized in these different organizers here, and depending on the card you're on and the point of interest that you're interacting with, whether it's something specific on that card, or if you're planning to move to an adjacent card, it's going to have a number on it indicating to you which card you need to draw in order to resolve that action. Most actions in the game do come at a cost, and the way that this works is that each player is going to have their own character as well as their own deck of cards that they'll be able to manage throughout the game, adding and removing cards from that deck as the game goes on. And these cards can have a bunch of different abilities and effects, but the main purpose of these cards is these stars and icons located on the left-hand side of the cards. The reason for this is that each of the actions will have some amount of cards that you either have to draw or that you're limited to drawing, and then there's going to be a number of stars that you're trying to achieve by drawing that amount of cards in order for it to be a success. When you succeed, there's going to be an outcome for that, and when you fail, there's going to be a different, usually more negative outcome for that. But this game is all centered around Push Your Luck, which is one of my favorite mechanisms, and the way that it's incorporated is that this deck of cards also functions as your health or energy, so you're going to want to try and draw as few cards as possible, but still manage to get a success. You will get familiar with your deck, and you'll also know some cards that you may have drawn already and what might be left in your deck, indicating to you how easy or difficult it might be to get a success. But like I said, these cards do also have different abilities associated with them, and normally whenever you're drawing cards in order to try and get those stars for a success, you're usually allowed to then keep one of those cards instead of putting it straight into your discard pile, and then you'll be able to use the ability of that card on one of your future actions. Not only that, but players can also get different items that can help them with actions, and what's really neat about all these different cards and items is that everything is connected by different icons, and you're going to be trying to match up iconography to indicate whether or not you can use a weapon or item for a particular task. For example, you could find yourself with just a long pole that you could use as a weapon, but you can also use it to balance any time that you're trying to do something a little bit more nimble. This is great for the cooperative aspect in the game because one player could specialize in fighting while someone else specializes with other actions, but you're not completely tied into that because you can lose these items at any moment, so players will constantly be in flux with the different options that are available to them, kind of changing up their gear set and specialties as the game plays out. A cool change with 7th Citadel that wasn't offered in 7th Continent is that there is a dialogue book and there's actually other people in the world that you can interact with. And I really did like the emptiness and feeling of being alone on 7th Continent, but this one just offers something a lot different from that. Like I said, players are going to be able to choose a threat and then play through the several chapters that that threat has to offer, but what's really neat about this is that there are branching paths depending on your decisions and successes, and also in between each threat, you're going to be coming back to your settlement. When you're at your settlement, you can actually use different cards that you found out on your adventure in order to level up a skill tree, gain new cards, build buildings that can help you in the future, improve the different stats of your settlement, which do help you with other actions and gaining influence in the overall world. But something that's really cool is that players also have this map that roughly outlines the collapsing land, because everything on this map isn't exactly accurate, but when you return to your settlement you can actually send out different troops in order to scout different areas of the map, and then when they come back they're going to be bringing you a card that you actually slot into the front of this map, and it's going to be replacing that portion of the map with a more up-to-date detailed version of that area. This can give players all sorts of different clues of what they could find there or where they might want to explore when they're in that area, but it can also present players with additional dialogue choices and options as they're playing throughout the game. Like I said, I absolutely love this game, so naturally this one is also my pick of the week, but I already did make this one my pick back when it originally launched, so it's just still my pick of the week. I'm really excited to see what the new content is going to be adding into the game, and I will say that I've only played through probably about 90% of the first threat. I'm hoping to finish that off really soon, and if I wasn't filming this, I'd probably be playing this game right now, but my only concern with this game that I haven't completely validated just yet is how much overlap there's going to be between the various threats. Because it is just a single map, you might end up in the same areas over and over again. But I do know that there's a lot of map left for me to explore, so I'm sure the other threats will probably force me in those directions in one way or another. Possibly moving my settlement. I'm not quite sure, but I do have faith based on everything I've seen with this game already and the team that's behind it, because like I said, they've done a fantastic job. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also launching on the 4th, we have Apothebakery, the Culinary Alchemists, and this one is a competitive game where players are going to be foraging for different resources, using those resources to create different potions and ingredients that you're then going to use to make cakes in order to heal and help those that are on the brink of death. The game plays over 6 rounds, with each of them having 3 phases. There's the foraging phase, the alchemy phase, and the healing phase. At the start of the game, players are going to be choosing different creature cards that they're going to be using to help them forage the various resources from the various biomes and terrain, with each of those creatures having certain advantages depending on the terrain that they're foraging in. The terrain is represented by different terrain cards where you're going to be collecting those different resources from, and these are going to be coming in a conveyor belt system, with new terrain cards being added each and every round. Depending on the terrain, players are going to be choosing a creature card that they think is going to be the most helpful for them, and then players are all going to be simultaneously revealing those cards. The initiative on the card indicates your position in the player order, and then the stamina on the card is going to indicate how much energy that you have to forage the various resources, with of course more stamina giving you more options. But once all players have revealed their cards, you're going to be flipping the location cards in order to reveal the different ingredients that those locations have to offer, and then also their various potencies. Players are then going to be moving into the alchemy phase, where they're going to be spending their various resources in order to brew or boost existing potions. And what's neat about this is that you will be able to draw potions from a bag, with some of those potions in the bag being failed attempts that still do accomplish their main objective, but they might have some side effects that you're going to have to try to work with to use them to your advantage, but most of the side effects won't make that easy. But once you've created a set of these potions and you're able to match it up with one of the cake cards, you'll be able to trade those potions in order to get that cake added into your possession. There's also going to be a bunch of different travelers cycling throughout the game, and you're going to be trying to line up the various effects of your potions and cakes in order to try and save as many of them as possible, helping you to gain more victory points and hopefully win the game. But like I said, these travelers are on the brink of death, and if you're just not quick enough, they can actually turn into a vengeful spirit. But after those 6 rounds, the player with the most victory points wins the game, and if you're interested to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. And now launching on the 4th, we have Wormwood, which is a campaign that I did already cover in the past, but I got pushed back until now, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this one is a card battler, but what makes this one really interesting is that you actually have to forge your cards before you're able to use them, and the cards that you have access to are determined by the faction that you choose to play as at the start of the game, but essentially there's going to be a couple different types of cards. There's going to be the echo cards, which act as victory points, and the first player to get 10 of those forged in front of them first wins the game. But then there are also the faction cards, which can have a variety of effects, but you're mostly going to be using them to attack your opponent and defend yourself in various ways. Players are going to be taking turns performing their actions, but at the start of your turn, you're always going to be drawing 2 special tokens into your pool, and these tokens just go on to your center faction board, but you can use these tokens in order to forge cards from your hand, because for each of the tokens that you have, you'll be able to put one of your cards face down to the right of you, and then assign it one of those tokens to indicate that it has begun to be forged. Each of these cards is going to have a number of turns that are required before it is fully forged, but once a card is forged, you'll be able to put it out in front of you. If it's an echo card, then you just get to put it out in front of you, showing that you have earned that victory point. But if it's a faction card, you can assign it either to the right of you to defend against your forges, or you can assign it to the left of you to defend against your hand. And the reason that that's important is because whenever a player uses any of their available cards in order to attack their opponent, they get to choose whether they want to attack their forge or attack their hand. And if the other player is not able to defend against it, then the active player gets to discard a card from either the forge or their hand, depending on what they attacked. But if that card is an echo card, then instead of discarding it, they actually get to keep it for themselves. But the rounds continue like this, with players gaining these forge tokens, then using them to forge cards from their hand, but any cards that you already do have out from a previous turn are going to have their tokens move around the circle clockwise, and once they've moved the appropriate amount for that card, you'll be able to get that card into your possession. But there is one more thing I want to point out here, because instead of using one of these tokens to forge a new card, you can instead flip it to the other side in order to push one of your existing forged tokens forward one space. This is a really excellent way to try and forge one of your cards a lot faster if you are particularly interested in getting that card forged. Not only this, but once you flipped over those tokens, they then become a different type of token, which can be used in order to trigger different actions with certain faction cards that you might have out in play. This creates a really interesting dynamic on how you want to use those tokens, but once you do have your cards out in play, those all become new actions that you can perform on a subsequent turn in order to get different benefits from those cards or even to attack your opponent. But like I said, the first player who's able to get 10 of those Echo cards forged in front of them first wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description. Also on the 4th, we have 2 brand new expansions added to 2GM Tactics, which if you're not familiar with is a card-based tactical war game. What's really cool about this is that the game still plays out much like one of your traditional war games, because you do have a modular map that you can actually piece together with a bunch of different tiles, and then you do have all of your various units that are represented by the cards. But what's neat about this is that depending on the power or country that you're playing as, you're going to have a completely different deck of cards that you're going to be choosing from in order to set up your initial army. Each of the cards can have different stats for their firing range, their health, armor, or special abilities, and players are going to be using action points in order to deploy those units out on the battlefield or to activate other supporting cards to help them in various ways. What's also really neat about this is that you can actually gain additional action points for your future turns depending on your positioning out on the board. And the game offers a variety of different scenarios with different objectives that players are trying to complete during the game in order to win the game. There's already a bunch of additional content you can mix into this game, but this new campaign is going to be adding a new France expansion that's going to be providing you with an entire deck of cards in order to incorporate France into the game. And then it's also going to include a Total War expansion, and it's going to add units specific to various nations like Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, China, Thailand, Hungary, Romania, and Croatia. And in addition to this, it's also going to include the concepts of militias, partisans, and reinforcements that you'll be able to use for different countries like the USA, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, Japan, and this new France expansion. If all that sounds interesting to you, I will have this one linked down below. Also on the 4th, we have a brand new expansion for Merchants of the Dark Road, and this one is called the Secret Villages expansion. And before I get into what exactly this expansion adds into the game, I'll just let you know how the original game plays, because this is a game that uses a rondel system in order for players to try and take actions and earn the most money or the most prestige than all the other players, because the way that the scoring works in this game is that your final score is going to be the lower of the two. So you're going to want to focus on both of those, try to get them both as high as possible. Each player is going to have their own personal merchant's cart, and on your cart you're always going to have 3 dice available to take actions with each of those dice being associated with a particular bonus as well. But essentially you're going to be choosing one of those dice to activate, getting that bonus, but then the value of the die is going to be moving you around the rondel that many times. And it may not be immediately clear, but the rondel in this game is the entire board, and you're going to be moving around the outer locations in a clockwise order, and anywhere that you stop on that rondel, you can choose to take the action of the location that you stopped on, or the action of the location before it. The different actions will allow players to do all sorts of things like gather goods in different ways, upgrade those goods to make them more valuable, sell the goods to heroes to make money based on the current market price, which can be manipulated throughout the game, or instead you could use those goods to try and complete various commissions in order to earn prestige. Whenever you do this, you're going to be delivering some amount of goods to one of the locations on the rightmost side of the board. But what's really neat here is that you can actually further optimize this, since some of the heroes need to travel to these various locations as well. And if you're able to pick up a hero to take with you and then deliver them along with completing your commission, that can gain you all sorts of additional bonuses. And you're probably already seen a pattern here where you can go ahead and collect and upgrade various goods, sell them to the heroes, and then also pick up heroes while you're doing that, deliver them to one of these locations while also fulfilling a commission with any of your other goods. That is one of the big puzzles of the game, but what's cool about traveling to a location is that anytime that a player does it, any other player can tag along with them in order to also go to that location. And this is also nice for the player that's actually leading the expedition because they're going to be able to draw a location card. Then there's going to be a bunch of different bonuses that you could gain by rolling dice and then matching them with the various icons on the card. And you're going to be able to roll an additional die for each player that comes along with you. The new expansion is going to be adding a bunch of new cards and upgrades and even a die that you'll be able to mix into the game, but it's also going to be adding some new locations that can be visited, and these are the secret villages, and these are all going to be associated with one of the regions out on the board. But the expansion is also going to be introducing the concept of the rumor tokens that are going to be populating in the different areas, and whenever you go to perform an action in that area, you can actually collect all the rumor tokens there, which can then be traded in for various bonuses. And I'm not going to get into what else is offered in this campaign, but they're also going to be offering a deluxe edition of Santa's Workshop and something called the Elf Creek Story Puzzles, which I don't really know much about, but it does sound interesting. And if you do want to learn more about that, you can go ahead and check all of these out in the description down below. Also on the 4th, we have Valerius, which is a competitive card game where players are going to be playing as different civilizations from across the universe. The whole goal here is to visit different biomes and locations in order to gather different resources, and then use those resources to complete various missions, which will gain you victory points and hopefully win you the game. Of course, not everything between civilizations is always friendly, and players will engage in different types of conflicts against each other. This is a game that looks like it uses simultaneous reveal in order for players to decide whether they want to take a more peaceful approach or if they want to take a more war-torn one. There's not a whole lot of info on how this game actually plays at the time when we film in this video, but I imagine this is going to work similar to games like Cosmic Encounter, where if you both choose to battle, then it's going to be the player that gets the highest strength amount that wins that battle. But if you both choose to take the peaceful approach, then maybe both people get a smaller reward, or maybe they're able to negotiate in some way. And if one person chooses war and the other chooses peace, then I imagine that the player choosing war is just going to instantly win that conflict, but then the peaceful civilization will probably get some sort of compensation. One thing I can say is that the game looks really vibrant and the artwork looks fantastic, so I am interested to learn more about this one, but that's unfortunately all I have at this moment. So if you want to check this one out and learn a little bit more about how it actually plays, you'll have to check out the campaign, and I will have that linked down below. And launch on June 6th, we have Grimcoven, and this one is a cooperative boss battler where you're going to be choosing a boss, choosing elite enemies to pair with that boss, and also choosing the characters you want to play as. And then the overall scenario is going to be determined by all of those decisions, as well as the environment you choose to play in. And then you're also going to be drawing environment cards that can modify different aspects of the battlefield. This one's not a campaign game, but there are going to be some cards and components that are locked away. And as you're leveling up your character, you'll be able to unlock those cards permanently, being allowed to use them in future scenarios. This is a game that takes place in a Victorian era where each player is going to be playing as a different hunter trying to take out that final boss. Each player is going to have their own asymmetrical abilities, and this is a game that uses dice worker placement, and each player might have different dice that they're going to be working with because the dice do come in different colors that can have different themes or effects, or also different restrictions as to where they can be placed. But players do have their own player board where they're going to have some basic actions where you'll be able to put those dice to take those, but then there's also going to be various cards that you'll be starting with and upgrading to throughout the game that will give you new worker placement locations. The way that you actually upgrade your character in this game is by collecting different corruption tokens and then spending those at the start of your turn in order to move up this track. Certain locations on this track will allow you to choose an upgrade, and normally that allows you to pick between two cards, or instead to add another die into your pool. But what's really cool about this upgrade track is that once you get halfway through the track, you're actually going to be flipping your character over to its corrupted side. This completely changes the miniature that you're going to be using to represent your character, and it's also going to be introducing some different effects and abilities that are going to come along with that. Of course, gaining corruption doesn't sound like that much of a positive thing, and although it can help you level up your character and get a lot more stronger, it also does come with some side effects, with the fact that you'll have to draw a corruption card every time that you upgrade your character, which normally has some sort of negative effect depending on your current corruption at the point of drawing that card. But the way that players actually gain corruption is by defeating enemies out on the board or moving to certain areas in order to acquire where the corruption has accumulated. The The rounds in this game alternate between the player's turns and then the enemy turn, and the way that this works is that during a player's turn they're going to be rolling their dice and then assigning it to the various locations out on their board or cards in order to take those different actions to move around on the board, prepare for an attack, attack the enemy, or even help the other players. And then of course trying to get yourself to a safe spot so that you aren't completely destroyed when it's the enemy's turn. Weaker enemies normally do just have a single health, which makes them a little bit easier to knock off the board, but they do spawn back each and every round. And then the elite enemies can behave a little bit differently depending on the ones that you included in the game, but they are more difficult and do have their own stats and effects. And then of course, each of the bosses are going to be playing very different from each other. But what's interesting about the bosses is that each of them are going to have their own deck of cards, and you're going to be trying to destroy each of those cards. This means that as you're defeating those cards and sending them back to the box, you might actually change the way that the boss operates or the way that you might have to attack them in order to deal any damage. If you're able to destroy that final card, then you win the game, but of course the enemies aren't going to make it easy, because on the enemy's turn, you're first going to be checking if there are any events in play, and then you're going to be resolving the effects of that, but then you're going to be activating each of the enemies, starting with the weaker ones and then moving up to the stronger ones and then the boss. The weaker enemies are going to attack if they're able to, but if they're not, then they're just going to increase their defense, whereas the more elite enemies will actually seek out the players if they're not able to attack them, but of course if they are able to, they're just going to issue that attack. And of course, depending on which enemies you included, this could operate a little bit differently from game to game, but then the boss is going to have its own sequence of actions that you're going to be following through with, depending on the state of the boss and which of the boss cards you've defeated already. These can be quite devastating, but there are different things that players can do during their turn in order to modify the action that the boss is going to perform. The game continues like this until either the players are defeated or that boss is defeated. And if you do want to learn more about this one, there's a lot to check out over on their Gamefound page. You can find this one down in the description below. And launching on June 6th, we have Operation Barclay, and this one is a war-themed game, but this one is not a war game. Instead, in this one, each player is playing as the intelligence director of either the Allied or the Axis forces. One player is going to be placing out face-down tiles to hide the true locations of the Allied invasions, while the other player is trying to gather evidence tokens in order to reveal these various locations. Players are going to build a hand of 5 cards in order to take tricks using a mechanism similar to poker, and then winning a trick is going to be securing you 2 evidence tokens. Players can also bet on who they think will have the best 5-card hand after revealing 3 of their cards, and then the correct bet earns 3 evidence tokens. Players can also manipulate their decks by creating a double cross deck where they can place cards into face down for use later, potentially using those in order to bluff and mislead their opponent. If the Axis player is able to gather enough evidence tokens to reveal all the different locations, then they win the game. But if the Allied player is able to prevent them from being able to do that, then they win the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I do have it linked down below. And that's everything I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still got a few awesome giveaways to announce. And the first one is for a giveaway for Terraria, the board game. And all you got to do to enter into these giveaways is leave a comment down below. And if you're not familiar with Terraria, you can go ahead and check it out on Kickstarter right now. But this is also based on the video game with the same name. This is essentially a cooperative game where players are going to be exploring different biomes, and then chopping down trees, digging tunnels, mining for ore, and fighting various enemies with their starting gear that they will be able to upgrade with the various resources that they're able to acquire. Players will also be able to build different buildings and recruit NPCs back to their home base in order to allow for more crafting opportunities. But if players are able to complete their objectives before their time runs out or before they run out of their respawns, they'll win the game. And of course, there will be a variety of enemies, but there'll also be a bunch of bosses as well that can actually transform as they are taking damage from the players. And this giveaway is a really nice one, so I just want to thank the publisher for that. But this one is for the Healthstone Pledge, which is going to get you the deluxe edition of the game, along with the neoprene player boards and neoprene dice tray, as well as sleeves for all of your cards, a wooden character pack, and all the applicable stretch goals and all the exclusive content. To enter this giveaway, like I said, all you got to do is leave a comment down below, and you can say anything that you want. Just make sure to leave the hashtag Terraria. And if you're looking for something to say, maybe you could let us know the last thing that you crafted. For myself, I just built myself some brand new raised garden beds for my garden biome. And the next giveaway we have looks like a really fun Euro game, and this one is called Stupor Mundi, and in this game players are going to be building up their own individual castles, with each of the building parts granting them with different abilities and bonuses, but you'll also be able to contribute to a main castle as well, and then you're going to be gaining different objective cards that can actually gain you victory points depending on how your castle compares to the one in the middle. Players also have various workers that you can send out on branching paths in order to upgrade them in different ways, granting you other opportunities and benefits. And the game offers a really neat way to take your actions where you're going to be using cards either for the action outlined on the card, or instead you can place it out on your player board, granting you access to one of the 2 actions that it touches when it's slotted in that position on your board. And this giveaway is also a really nice one because this one's going to be for an all-in deluxe edition of the game. And to enter this giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below, and you can leave any comment that you want, but just make sure to leave the hashtag castle. And if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know the last renovation that you made on your castle. For myself, I just hung up 2 bird feeders, and that definitely counts. And the next giveaway we have is for the Hex Games Collection Volume 2, which is going to be offering you 6 different games that all play very different from each other, but they all do share the common theme that they are all comprised of 18 hexes. We have Castle Duel, which is a light strategy game, and then we have the Many Dungeons, which is a cooperative dungeon crawler, Flippo, which is a fast-paced party numbers game, Ginger Fingers, which is also a party game that offers a bunch of little mini games as part of it, Molecules, where players are trying to place tiles and manipulate the tiles in order to create the longest strand of their color. And then finally, a Contaceros, which is an auto-battler video game inspired game where you're going to be putting different characters out and making them battle, but then you'll be able to modify them between rounds in order to make them a little bit more stronger and hopefully be the final winner. And this giveaway is going to be for a pledge for the full collection of the Volume 2 games, and all you got to do to enter this is leave a comment down below with the hashtag HEX. And you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could suggest what style of game you would like to see next in perhaps a Volume 3. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways. And the first one we had was for a couple pledges of Ironwood. We're going to be drawing one here right now in this video, but then I am also giving another copy away over on our Discord. And that one actually has 10 hours left at the time of me filming this. So if you do watch this quick enough and you didn't win in the video, you can go ahead and check out the Discord and enter in that really quickly. And your odds are quite really good because there is less than 300 people entered in on this giveaway so far. So if you want to win games, this Discord and my channel do actually have really great odds. And I'll go ahead and draw for Ironwood first, but the other giveaway we had is for Dance of Muses. And to draw a winner, I'm going to be using this application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Ko-fi subscribers. And if you do want to help out this channel, I really do appreciate it. I don't charge anything to publishers and I don't require games for coverage. So it's thanks to all these supporters that allow me to continue to do this and allow me to keep my coverage independent and also to not pick and choose which games I want to cover. I just want to cover all the games and give you the best information that I can. Let's go ahead and draw for Ironwood first. So let's go ahead and throw that in and draw the comments and draw a winner. And the winner for a pledge for Ironwood is Michael Miggs McDonald, which is one of our Ko-fi subscribers. So congratulations on the win. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a sweet pledge. Like I said, don't forget you can jump in on the Discord if you are watching this early enough. And if you're not, you can always subscribe down below to get notified as soon as these videos go up. And I do also have a way to get notified anytime I run giveaways over on the Discord. You just gotta head over to the rules channel. Then there's an emoji there that you can click to get notified anytime I post there. But other than that, I have all notifications turned off. All my notifications on the Discord are opt-in. The next giveaway we have to draw for is Dance of the Muses. And let's just go ahead and replace this with Muse. And we will go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of this pledge is Trodos, which is also a member from Ko-fi, so thanks so much for the support. I'll reach out and let you know that you won yourself a nice little pledge here, but of course either of you can reach out to me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that all sorted out. And that's everything I have for you this week, and I hope you all had a fantastic week, hopefully with a few games here and there, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend as well. I actually had to pause a game of Glory to Rome in order to continue filming this video and get it all wrapped up, so I'm excited to get back to it. But I'm always excited to hang out with all of you in these videos as well, so thanks so much for tuning in and checking out the video. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.